What's up, y'all? Come with me and my cousin. Finna get my Chanel bag. So let's go.
A second person has died in a Miramar triple shooting that happened over the 4th of July holiday. Tonight, the family of the two victims speaking out for the first time about their devastating loss and who these individuals really were.
For 3 days, this was a story about one death. Then on July 8th, it became two. Arthur Lee Johnson III, known to everyone who loved him simply as AJ, died from the injuries he suffered in the same ambush that had already claimed the life of his cousin, Brianna Johnson. He was only 21 years old, the same age as Brianna. For 3 days, doctors fought to save him. His family waited beside hospital machines that seemed to measure hope one heartbeat at a time. Every phone call carried the possibility of good news. Every conversation ended with the same prayer, just let him make it. But on July 8th, the call finally came. AJ was gone. Just like that, what investigators had been treating as a triple shooting with one fatal victim became a double homicide. That sounds like legal language. Cold language. But underneath those two words, double homicide, was something much heavier. One family had just lost two young people who had grown up together. Two cousins. Two 21-year-olds. Two lives erased by the same burst of gunfire. Imagine planning one funeral, only to realize, before you've even had time to grieve, you're now planning another. It's the kind of pain that changes a family forever. And while relatives were preparing to bury AJ, investigators suddenly found themselves facing an even greater challenge. Because AJ wasn't just another victim. He was also one of the only people who knew exactly what happened inside that Lamborghini during the final moments before the shooting. When a witness dies, investigators don't simply lose another statement. They lose an entire perspective, a memory that exists nowhere else. Questions that might never receive answers. Whatever AJ saw, whoever he recognized, whatever he may have remembered about the white sedan that pulled alongside them, all of that disappeared with him. That left detectives with one surviving witness from inside the vehicle. One man carrying the weight of a story that had already taken two lives. According to reports at the time, the survivor had suffered devastating facial injuries, leaving him unable to immediately speak with investigators in a way they normally would have hoped. Think about the psychological burden that creates. You survive an attack that kills two people you've known your entire life. You wake up in a hospital. You're in pain. You try to understand why you're alive while two people you love aren't. At the same time, detectives are waiting to hear what you remember. Your family wants answers. The public wants answers. The media wants answers. And somewhere outside that hospital room, the people responsible, if they haven't yet been identified, know you're still alive. It's a level of pressure that very few people will ever experience. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, something else was happening. As investigators carefully built their case behind closed doors, the internet began building one of its own. And that's where this story started changing. Not because new evidence had been released, but because the silence left by the investigation was quickly filled by something much louder. Social media. Within hours, timelines began appearing online. People compared videos. Screenshots spread across Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Every photograph from earlier that night was examined. Every friendship was questioned. Every person who had been seen with Brianna suddenly became part of the conversation. The investigation was no longer taking place only inside police headquarters. It was now unfolding in millions of comment sections. And as often happens in cases like this, facts and speculation began traveling at exactly the same speed. One of the people suddenly caught in the middle of that online storm was a woman identified on social media as Brianna's hairstylist. For days, her name appeared in comments, reposts, and live streams. People wanted to know who she was, why she had been with the group that night, and whether she knew something investigators hadn't yet revealed. As the speculation grew louder, she decided to speak, not through a television interview, not through a police press conference, but through a lengthy statement posted on social media. Whether people believed her or not, one thing became clear almost immediately. She wasn't trying to tell the story of the shooting itself. She was trying to explain everything that happened before it. According to her public statement, the night had started like countless other nights among friends. She said the group first attended a birthday celebration before eventually making their way to Kikun nightclub. On the surface, nothing about that sounds unusual. Young adults celebrating, friends spending time together, photos being taken, music playing. The kind of evening that, at the time, probably felt ordinary. But after tragedy strikes, ordinary moments suddenly become evidence people try to dissect. The hairstylist acknowledged that there had been previous tension involving people connected to the group. However, she also said she believed those issues had already been resolved. That distinction matters. She wasn't claiming there had never been conflict. She was saying she believed the conflict had ended. Whether that belief was accurate is something only investigators, supported by evidence, can determine. Looking back, she described noticing unfamiliar faces around the club. At the time, according to her account, there was nothing that convinced her something violent was about to happen. That's one of the cruelest things about hindsight. Our minds replay the smallest details after trauma. The stranger who looked in your direction, the person standing across the room, the car parked nearby. Things that meant nothing in the moment suddenly feel loaded with meaning afterward. Psychologists call this hindsight bias. Once we know the ending, our brains convince us the warning signs were obvious all along, but they rarely are. According to her statement, the night continued, and eventually she says she was dropped off before the shooting occurred. Then came the phone call. She claimed AJ answered while screaming that he had been shot. Just imagine hearing that. One moment your friends are driving away. The next, someone is desperately telling you they've been shot. Whether every detail of that moment is exactly as remembered isn't something the public can verify. But emotionally, it's easy to understand why a memory like that would stay with someone forever. She also wrote that, based on what she later learned, she came to believe the victims may have been followed after leaving the club. Again, it's important to be precise. That was her personal belief expressed in a public statement. Miramar police have not publicly confirmed that sequence of events or endorsed that conclusion, and that's where this story becomes especially difficult. The public naturally wants every missing piece immediately. Investigators don't have that luxury. They have to separate what people believe happened from what can actually be proven. As more people read her statement, one section stood out more than any other. It wasn't where she described the club. It wasn't where she talked about the phone call. It was where she admitted that, in the confusing hours after the shooting, she had shared names with Brianna's family because she genuinely believed she was helping them understand what had happened. Later, according to her own statement, she realized she had identified at least one person incorrectly. She publicly apologized. That admission says something important about the emotional chaos that follows a tragedy. When something this devastating happens, people don't just lose loved ones. They lose certainty. Everyone starts searching for answers at the same time. Friends compare conversations. Family members replay old messages. People remember things differently. Someone hears a rumor and passes along, believing they're helping. Another person repeats it because they trust the source. Before long, something that began as an unverified possibility is being treated online as if it were established fact. The hairstylist acknowledged that she had made a mistake, apologized publicly, and said she never intended to mislead anyone. Whether that apology changed public opinion is another story, because by then, social media had already chosen its own pace. And social media rarely slows down long enough for corrections. That's one of the biggest dangers in a case like this. The original accusation might be seen by hundreds of thousands of people. The correction often reaches only a fraction of them. Investigators understand this, which is one reason they tend to be careful about naming people before evidence supports it. Once someone's name becomes attached to a tragedy online, that association can follow them long after the truth becomes clearer. Throughout her statement, the hairstylist repeatedly insisted that she and the other women who had been with the group were not involved in planning or encouraging the violence. Those were her public statements. They are not findings announced by investigators, nor are they evidence by themselves. They are one person's account of an incredibly traumatic night, and that's worth remembering. Witnesses don't experience traumatic events like video cameras. Human memory doesn't record every second with perfect clarity. Stress changes perception. Fear narrows attention. Afterward, memories are often reconstructed piece by piece, sometimes with incredible accuracy and sometimes with painful gaps. That's why detectives don't rely on one interview. They compare witness statements with surveillance footage. They examine phone records. They analyze forensic evidence. They test every timeline against physical facts. A good investigation isn't built on the loudest voice. It's built on the evidence that survives careful scrutiny. Meanwhile, online, many people had already reached their own conclusions. Some believed every word the hairstylist wrote. Others rejected everything she said before reading the entire statement. But belief isn't proof. Disbelief isn't proof either. Justice demands something stronger than opinions. It demands evidence. And as detectives continued working behind the scenes, they were likely sorting through far more information than the public had ever seen. While the internet debated screenshots, investigators were examining facts. Those are two very different worlds. And history has shown that they don't always arrive at the same destination. By the end of that week, this case had become two completely different stories. One story was happening inside the Miramar Police Department. Detectives were reviewing surveillance footage, analyzing forensic evidence, tracking timelines, interviewing witnesses, and following every credible lead they received. The other story was unfolding online. Millions of people had become emotionally invested in Brianna's final hours. Every new screenshot was treated like a breakthrough. Every live stream became another theory. Every post from someone connected to the victims was dissected line by line, as though the comment section had become an extension of the investigation itself. But the truth is, those are two very different worlds. The internet rewards whoever speaks first. The justice system rewards whoever can prove it. That's an important distinction. Because while the hairstylist statement gave the public another perspective on the hours before the shooting, it didn't close the case. It didn't answer who pulled the trigger. It didn't explain why Brianna and AJ were targeted. And it didn't replace the evidence investigators were quietly gathering behind the scenes. If anything, her statement reminds us how complicated these moments become after tragedy. Everyone is trying to reconstruct the same night from different memories. One person remembers a conversation. Another remembers a face. Someone else remembers a vehicle. None of those memories automatically become facts. They're simply pieces of a much larger puzzle. That's why investigators have to compare every account against objective evidence. Phone records, surveillance cameras, ballistic reports, digital data, and forensic analysis. Those things don't rely on memory. They don't rely on emotion. They simply tell investigators what they can prove. As for the hairstylist, her public statement became one more piece of the conversation, not the conclusion. It offered context. It offered her perspective. It answered some of the questions people have been asking about where the group had been and how she viewed the events leading up to the shooting. But it also left important questions unanswered. And that's okay. Not every witness has every answer. Sometimes surviving a tragedy means living with questions you can't answer yourself. As viewers, it's easy to feel frustrated by that uncertainty. We want the ending. We want someone to arrest. We want someone to blame. But real investigations rarely unfold as neatly as social media expects. Sometimes the most responsible thing we can do is admit that we don't yet know everything. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson from this chapter of Brianna Johnson's case. In the absence of official answers, people naturally try to fill the silence. Families search for meaning. Friends replay memories. Witnesses question what they saw. The internet builds theories. Meanwhile, detectives continue doing the slow, often invisible work of separating facts from assumptions. Eventually, only one version will matter, the version supported by evidence. Until that day comes, the hairstylist statement remains exactly what was intended to be, a public account from someone trying to explain her experience during one of the most traumatic nights of her life. Whether every detail aligns with the evidence is something only the investigation can ultimately determine. As for the rest of us, perhaps the better question isn't whether we can solve this case from our phones. It's whether we're willing to let the truth emerge at its own pace, even when that means living with uncomfortable uncertainty. Because somewhere behind every rumor, every screenshot, and every viral post, there are still two families waiting for something far more important than another theory. They're waiting for answers, and we will be here. Subscribe to Mystora Crimes, like, comment, and share.